Millions of despairing men, women, and little children, victims of a system that makes men torture and imprison innocent people.
You cannot shake hands with a clenched fist.
Produced by a nuclear exchange would be carried by wind and water and soil and seed to the far corners of
the kingdom of God, the kingdom of heaven.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
We're not saying that planet Earth is coming to an end. We're saying that planet Earth is about to be refurbished, spaded under, and have another chance to serve as a garden for another civilization.
Most of the people in here are just your reflections. They're your mistakes.
1776 will commence again if you try to take our firearms.
1 million of the planet's 8 million species are threatened.
You are what you repeatedly do. Therefore, excellence ought to be a habit, not an act.
Your lives and the credibility of the United Nations is at stake.
Epstein didn't kill himself.
The reason this is such an interesting time is not only because we're on the threshold of the end of this civilization.
They're trying to take you out with bullshit.
The experience of the past 2 years has proven beyond doubt that no nation can appease the Nazis.
To those who can hear me, I say, do not despair. The misery that is now upon us is but the passing of greed, the bitterness of men who fear the way of human progress. The hate of men will pass, and dictators die, and the power they took from the people will return to the people. And so long as men die, liberty will never perish.
In the language of the U.S. Department of Defense, these are unidentified aerial phenomena.
Roswell's a very interesting place with a lot of people that would like to know what's going on.
There is very compelling evidence that we may not be alone.
This is the Garden of Doom.
Welcome everybody into Garden of Doom, and this week we're having a show that I've been trying to get done for a while. I wanted to get one on Voodoo. Longtime listeners know at some point I did a solo show where one of the topics was me researching Voodoo, and I was sort of talking about it. But you all know I don't like to do solo shows. And then several months back I had a show with M.G. Stevens, who had studied Voodoo for some period of time, and she referred me to a couple people, and one of them was our guest today, and this is Mambo Brandy. So hi, Mambo Brandy, how are you today?
Hey, Jeff, doing great. And yourself?
I'm doing just great. And Brandy's coming to us from New Orleans, or the Crescent City, New Orleans, as I think the folks down there say. And she had, well, she'll tell you a bit about herself, but she is one of the, maybe the founder and proprietor of something called Voodoo Authentica. They have a shop, they do presentations, they do education, they have festivals, so all of that cool stuff. But she's also going to, sort of guide us on a 101 level course of what is Voodoo, what is New Orleans Voodoo, and some related items. But first, let's ask Brandy to tell us a little bit about herself. So, do you want to be called Brandy or Mambo Brandy?
You said Mambo Brandy once. That's enough. Brandy can carry it for the rest. Brandy is fine. I don't want to call you Doom Jeff for the rest of the show, so I'm just going to stick with Jeff. Maybe Captain Doom.
I would prefer something like Field Marshal Doom, but we'll work on it. But we'll stick with Jeff until I settle on one.
Mambo is just another word for voodoo priestess. We've got that established. I'm a voodoo priestess. That's what Mambo means, and Brandy is cool for the rest of the show. I'm not definitely one for formalities.
Excellent. Okay, well, good. I learned something already. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your background and your journey into voodoo and how one becomes a voodoo priestess?
Well, I'm born and raised in New Orleans, and as a child in New Orleans, it's really all around you. If you look for it, if your spirit is called to it, it's more of something that you are called to. In terms of the priesthood, anyone can look into voodoo, learn about it, read about it. But ever since I was a child, I feel I've gotten I guess, messages from spirit, calls to spirit. Always been interested in how other people celebrate their version, I'd say, of the divine, of God. Done a lot of studying, with other cultures, because I'm very interested in how people, the similarities amaze me. All over the world, there's so many people who are really doing the same thing and calling it different names. And in New Orleans, Voodoo is a part of our culture. It's a part of our heritage. And really, it's in the air. It's in the water. So if you just pay a little attention and open your spirit up, and also if there's the call, you listen to it, you will be called the spirit. You'll have dreams. You'll notice just symbols and signs and things that maybe some people take for granted, how a rose is growing. Not to get too kooky here, but I see a lot of symbols around me and have since I was a child that I took as spiritual messages that really turned out to be legit spiritual messages that maybe a friend might have passed off as, oh, it's just a bumblebee. It's just the way a rose is growing. It's nothing special, nothing significant. But I listened. I knew that these weren't just things that were happening. They were messages. And I haven't been guided wrong when I've listened to those messages and listened to my instincts. And that's honestly a big part of Voodoo. I also have my godmother who's Haitian. She's a rest her soul, a Voodoo priestess named Mama Lola. And she is my, again, rest her soul, my mother in the Haitian Voodoo part. I am a New Orleans Voodoo priestess, but all of my initiations were in Haiti. So I kind of ride that fence between being from New Orleans, having my parents, my grandparents, my grandparents. I go way back in New Orleans, so I honor all of those New Orleans spirits, but I've also got that other side of my family, who's Haitian. So my initiatory rites as a priestess are actually Haitian style and done in Haiti. So I have a heart really Haiti's got a whole country of people to honor and continue those Haitian Voodoo traditions. But in New Orleans, we've just got us. So I definitely have a focus on keeping those traditions alive, helping to educate people about what those traditions are, where they come from. At the same time, I honor both. And I also honor the African Orisha because in New Orleans Voodoo, because of our history, we have the African Orisha and the Haitian Loa. Those are the different spirit forces associated with those different traditions. And those are because of we came by them honestly. It's part of our history. Being a practitioner of New Orleans Voodoo, you honor the African Orisha, the Haitian Loa, and some spirits that are just in New Orleans that you don't find in other traditions, such as the great Voodoo Queen, Mamselle Marie Laveau.
I think this is probably a good time to pause for a second and sort of see if we can get some definitions or what's the difference between the African Orisha or tradition and the Haitian Voodoo tradition as compared and contrasted to the New Orleans Voodoo tradition. What are the distinctions and maybe I guess maybe it's probably easier to start with like what is sort of it writ large, and then what are the distinctions, sort of a compare and contrast.
Oh, writ large, and the lawyer comes out.
I say that the term every show, and I'm sure the if there was a drinking game for it, if my audience has a drinking game, that would probably be a word they would use.
Do I get $1 every time you say writ large?
Yeah, going forward, we can make that deal.
$1 or a drink. Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
Well, basically, you've got African voodoo, or African Vodun, you'll see them, especially when academics are exploring these topics, you'll see the word voodoo spelled differently. Again, especially when you're dealing with academics and books written by academics. My godmother, I would say, how do you like to spell voodoo? She's like, I don't spell it, I practice it. So the spellings are typically less important to people who practice than the people who are academics writing the books. But
Sure.
To honor that, the African, you see a lot of Vodun, Vodun or Vodoun. And these are practices, as I said, Haiti has a whole country. Well, Africa has several countries to honor those traditions. And they're traditions that never left Africa. Not never left, but they are still practiced in Africa as they have been. In Haiti, same thing. You've got practices, Haitian voodoo, which you often see spelled Vodou, but not exclusively. And these are practices that have continued and that have a whole country, or in Africa's case, several countries, to honor, continue, and celebrate them. But then you've got New Orleans voodoo, which, because of the slave trade, there were people who were taken as slaves directly from Africa and also from Haiti and the French West Indies. So to New Orleans, to the port of New Orleans. So you ended up with this combination of African practices, Haitian practices, Native American practices, things that were indigenous to our area, where a combination took place, where you have this practice today. Some people call it a religion, some people call it a spiritual path of New Orleans voodoo, where you have African Orisha, or African spirit forces, Haitian Loa, some Native American influences honored, that were already here. And again, spirits that are really exclusive to New Orleans voodoo, but have become beloved by people who visit here and found a kinship with certain New Orleans voodoo spirits, like Marie Laveau. They have people in their homes and in other places. There are shrines to Marie Laveau, a very New Orleans voodoo spirit, all over the world, because she's such a powerful force to be reckoned with. So again, because these practices continue to go on in these other countries, even though people from those countries, whether through the slave trade or modern times, have relocated to other areas of the world, they've of course brought their practices with them. So you have Haitian voodoo as it's being practiced today, practiced in New Orleans, practiced in Miami. You have African Vodun as it's practiced today, being practiced in Africa, and wherever people from Africa find themselves throughout the world. Mm-hmm. So, the practices have differences, but they also have a lot of commonality, a lot of common ground. In Africa, let's just say the Orisha, you've got an African Orisha who is called Elegua. Well, in Haitian voodoo, you've got a spirit called Papa Legba. They're both guardians. They are definitely distinct spirit forces, but they share a lot in common. They have similar colors to represent them, similar offerings. They are both the guardians of the crossroads. They are both gone to first in ceremony to get the door open between humans and that spirit communication. It's very important to honor them first, to open that door to the rest of the ceremony. So as a initiated Haitian Mambo and a New Orleans voodoo priestess as well, I'm not going to land anywhere and see something within the diaspora being practiced and be like, what the heck's going on here?
Right.
I'm going to understand, okay, we're honoring a crossroads spirit right now. Now we're moving on to either Ogun or Papa Ogu. Now we're moving on to this. Now we're moving on to that. The names are different, and again, the spirits are distinct, but they have similar attributes. And if you've been doing this long enough, you know what's going on no matter where you find yourself. I hope that comes close to answering your question.
I think it does. So it's not like Zeus and Jupiter, which are basically the same god, just different names. It's a similar type of spirit, a similar type of purpose, but it sounds like the local geography and the local culture, changes it, and it adapts to be a distinct spirit based on I'll just use personality of the locality.
Absolutely. When you think about how different these areas are, you have different herbs, you have different geography. You have some areas that are dry, some areas that are filled with water. So wherever these traditions land, they've had to adapt to what is there, what ingredients are there. If you come from a place where you were honoring water spirits, you find yourself in a dry space, you have to adapt. Luckily in New Orleans, we are literally surrounded by every body of water imaginable. And in Louisiana in general, there's not a place you can't find, a bayou, a river, access, ocean access, whatever you need is there.
Right. I want, you indicated that you are a priestess and a mambo, and one of Haitian and one of New Orleans voodoo. So, obviously that's very different than, like for instance, you couldn't be both a Catholic priest and a, Protestant minister at the same time. Maybe you could switch from one to the next, but you can wear both simultaneously, which is a big distinction from, I guess maybe I'll just say the more traditional religions, though that's pretty arguable, especially if you're going back to something that has its roots in Africa versus things that have their roots, anything after Africa is probably newer, right? So it's probably younger.
Yeah, I'm also baptized Catholic, and there are tie-ins there. I love my Catholic saints, and because of the brutal way that voodoo came to the quote-unquote New World,
right?
People were not allowed to practice their traditions freely. They were enslaved. So the religion that was acceptable at the time here in New Orleans was Catholicism. So that was a mask. Catholicism was when the slave master would come into the slave quarters, there would be an image of, Catholic imagery, and they would be using that imagery to honor their own spirits from their own home. But over time, rather than being substitutions, you got more of a synchronization going on. Mama Lola, my godmother, is such a great example of that. She loves, as I do, she loves Urzuli Freda, a certain Haitian Loa that's all about love, abundance, prosperity. And the Catholic spirit that represents her, let's say the mask, that was used as a mask to preserve this tradition. It is how voodoo was kept alive, by using this system, this brilliant system of a Catholic saint to represent a voodoo spirit for us. But over time, like I said, kind of synchronization, a blend took place where instead of, I'm either honoring this aspect of the Virgin Mary. There's so many aspects of the Virgin Mary picture different ways.
Sure.
There's Caridad del Cobre. There's, Our Lady of Guadalupe. They're all Mary, but they're just in different aspects. So all of these different aspects connect with different spirit forces. Just like St. Peter, some people use St. Lazarus, but there are different aspects of Papa Legba, a spirit I mentioned before. Some people use St. Peter because he holds the key. I told you he was the gateway.
Mm-hmm.
He holds the key. So there was imagery that help to make these connections. Oh, okay, St. Peter holds the key. So that's Elegua, that's Papa Legba. So instead of, again, there being these very distinct, okay, this is St. Peter, this is Papa Legba, they really became blended. So we love St. Peter and Babaluaye, another spirit that some people are using, to represent that crossroads spirit. Because, as I said, there are different traditions, and I'm letting you know how I practice.
Of course.
And, there are so many different ways to practice. But you have these different representations of these different spirit forces. And at Voodoo Authentica, for example, we have an altar that honors all of our crossroads spirits together. You've got Eshu, you've got Papa Legba, you've got Elegua. They all have their own areas on that altar, but they're able to share space comfortably. And trust me, if you've got spirits together that aren't interested in being together on an altar, they will let you know very distinctly that they're not interested in sharing space. But we have spirits that coexist very well, that are simply different aspects of very similar spirit forces with different names. And, similar offerings are given, but we do honor those differences. I don't ride the train of, that's just a same spirit, different name. No, I don't do that. These are different spirits that deserve their own respect, their own name, their own background, their own traditions to be honored. And that is something that we really try to make clear when we are sharing information at Voodoo Authentica with people, which we try to do a lot of. We always try to let people know a little bit more about voodoo than they came in knowing.
There's a little animism in there. Right? There's a little animism in there that this stream has a spirit from here. The stream 100 miles away has a spirit there, but they're a similar spirit, but they're not the same.
Correct.
Yeah.
And so when I hear about people saying things like, oh, that's just the same spirit called by a different name somewhere else, I find that it disrespects it can disrespect whole traditions that have their own background, culture, stories about how these spirits came into being. And so I don't go that route where I'm just like, oh yeah, Aleg was just Papa Legba called by different. No, Elegua is his own spirit force. Papa Legba is his own spirit force. Eshu is his own spirit force. And they are connected with different traditions in the diaspora. So, you want to honor all of those and, tread carefully and make sure that you're giving honor to each instead of trying to take the lazy way.
Sure. I have a question for you, and that is, obviously you've driven it home very clearly. There's a difference between Haitian and New Orleans and the Western African roots. But are there different variations or versions that are just as distinct? Say, you go further west to Houston, you go up north, maybe Lafayette, into the Mississippi Delta and Alabama, or is like New Orleans voodoo sort of most of your, United States of America variation?
New Orleans voodoo is for and about New Orleans. What you get in a lot of the South is now there are people, just like there are people practicing Haitian voodoo and African voodoo throughout the world in the United States that have brought their traditions with them. Mm-hmm. You get the same thing with New Orleans voodoo, but just because some people want to call something just because, like, if you decide I want to do things my own way, then it's best if you either create your own tradition or call it something else. But it's not a free-for-all. It's not a free-for-all, although we embrace and historically have in New Orleans voodoo for reasons that are in the history books, why we have African Orisha honored and celebrated in New Orleans Voodoo, why we have Haitian traditions celebrated in New Orleans Voodoo, why we have our own traditions celebrated in New Orleans Voodoo. It's one thing to have that has evolved and built itself over time. Nothing to take that elsewhere and just say, well, I'm going to do this, that, the other thing, throw a little Greek mythology in there, throw a little of this, throw it a little of that, throw it a little of that, pop in some gumbo and jambalaya and just call it New Orleans Voodoo. That's where you get into a little bit of trouble, is in calling things what they're not. I'm not saying there isn't a lot of freedom, and each house, even in Haitian Voodoo and African Voodoo, house to house, some houses, they have their own spirits that won't be found in other houses. They're family spirits. So it's not like, oh, this is identical. If you go throughout Haiti, this is going to be, identically done, the exact same spirits. That's simply not the case. There are some houses, meaning once someone is initiated and they are their own ungan or mambo, their own priest or priestess, they are autonomous at that point. They can't go completely, off into cuckoo land, but it is their house and they are running it as they see fit. And again, they have certain family spirits that will only be in their house. So, back to what, more of what you were saying, again, not a free for all, but you can't just take these practices, go wherever you want, change them up in any fashion you see fit, and still call them what you want. It's like you took my recipe for gumbo, that I learned from my family. Like, gumbo is a sacred dish. It's as much a part of our traditions as, family traditions, celebrations. Food is sacred. It's an important part of our life. And a dish that is as synonymous with New Orleans as, Mardi Gras or anything else. You can't just take gumbo and say, you know what? I think I'm going to throw a cream of mushroom soup in there. And I'm still going to call it gumbo. No, your ass ain't.
I think I understand what you're saying. So if somebody with sincerely held beliefs and they move to, I don't know, whatever, Galveston, and I'm making this up, I have no idea, and they move to Galveston and they detect, they find spirits that are unique to Galveston, and they have a relationship with them and that spreads, it's feasible that there could be something legitimately called Galveston Voodoo. But if Jeff the Huckster, studies enough voodoo just to be dangerous, goes to Galveston, and I decide to throw in a little bit of, I read up on some Hopi lore and I throw in a little Canaanite religion or whatever, and I say, this is Galveston Voodoo, I'm full of it.
It's better to just call it Jeffism. And let me tell you, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that whatsoever. I'm just saying, as long as you present it as Jeffism, that Jeffism may reach many people, and people identify with it. They're comfortable with it. They're like, oh my God, I've got a home in Jeffism that I've never found anyplace else.
Don't give me any ideas.
But yeah, but just saying that, kind of throwing in whatever you want to the recipe, and, at some point, it ain't the recipe that it started as.
Is there like a fourth kind that's recognized? I mean, the word legitimate is the only one I can, and that doesn't sound like the right word based on our conversation, but for lack of a better word, in my mind at the moment, is there like another legitimate form of voodoo that's recognized, somewhere else other than the ones that we've discussed that sort of have, anywhere near the prominence or the visibility of Haitian, African, New Orleans?
Well, that word legitimate is a little tricky.
Yeah, I know.
But what I will say is that, you know, again, going back to the African slave trade, these are people who were taken from different regions of Africa and ended up in Brazil, Cuba, all over the world, you know, not just New Orleans and, you know, Haiti, et cetera, et cetera. So you have traditions that aren't called voodoo, but you've got Santeria, you've got Candomblé. It's not like, oh, these are versions of voodoo, but they are continuations, adaptations of spiritual traditions that all originated in Africa. And, you know, and as far as legitimacy, absolutely. You know, these are people who are kept traditions alive through the worst of conditions, you know, primarily through oral traditions, and kept these traditions alive no matter where they found themselves in the world. One thing that a lot of them do have in common is that connection to Catholicism. You'll see it in Brazil. You'll see it in Cuba. You'll see it in Haiti. You'll see it, you know, all over the place. These connections, you'll see these Catholic images on voodoo altars, on Santeria altars, on Candomblé, you name it, you see that Catholic imagery because that is what was acceptable. And at this point, sure, people could say, all right, we're all clear, we can take all that Catholic imagery, but now that's a part of the history, a part of the story, which removing it, and some people have. Some people have to get I don't want to say quote unquote, but I will, quote unquote, purity. But the truth is, I hate to use an analogy that may not fit here at all, but once a building has burned, you know, some of those singes, you know, you could make that building look brand new, but some of those singes are part of that building's history then. Right. You know, some of that pain, the singeing, trying to just remove all that, it's saying, okay, this history didn't exist. We're trying to return to some place of quote unquote purity, but while you're doing that, you know, you got a couple hundred years that have passed where this has been incorporated. You know, the Catholicism has been incorporated, has become a part of it for people throughout the world. And I'm honoring, you know, let's just say Caridad del Cobre, you know, one of the aspects of the Virgin Mother, independently, while I'm honoring Oshun and African Orisha, while I'm honoring them both at the same time. It's not that easy to explain, but they're together. I can honor them individually, together. I hope you get where I'm coming from.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I assume that there are certain ceremonies or chants or prayers or whatever that appeal to one, or that may appeal to all, or some combination. And as someone trained in that and steeped in the tradition, you know the difference.
Exactly. And sometimes I'm just blending those. I am blending like the Catholic effigy that is representing, like if you look at one of our altars, you will see representations of Oshun that have nothing to do with the Catholic iconography. You'll see a blend. You'll see the Catholic image. You'll see images from Oshun from all over the place that are all together on our altar, and they all come together to represent and honor Oshun. But I'm still able to honor that spirit, Mary, that saint, all by themselves too. The separations get fuzzy, and they get fuzzy because at times they're needless. I don't want to sound like I'm contradicting myself where I've said all of these spirits are unique and distinct. And then I'm saying, well, sometimes, I'm mainly talking about the Catholic aspect when I talk about the blending, but let's just take the Catholic calendar. When it's St. Patrick's Day, it's Papa Damballa Day.
Mm-hmm.
The serpent spirit of wisdom and balance. While we are honoring the Catholic traditions of the St. Patrick's Day, the St. Patrick's Day parades, we're also doing ceremonies for Papa Damballa and, baking breads. I don't know about what y'all do where you are, but in New Orleans, it's like Catholic extreme stream plus the way I grew up. So it's not just like, okay, go to church. No, when it's St. Patrick's or St. Joseph Day, you've got breads, pastries, candles. You have got doing it up big for these Catholic saints. And you do something very similar for those spirits the voodoo spirits that have been syncretized with them. Some of the same colors, like everyone associates green with St. Patrick.
Yeah. Guess
what Papa Damballa's main color is? Green and white. So, like right now, my altar here, I have altars all over Voodoo Authentica and all over at home, little altars everywhere. And I've got, pictures of Moses, pictures of St. Patrick, other images that have nothing to do with the Catholic imagery, and symbols that are also on that altar, all together, honoring Papa Damballa and St. Patrick and Moses all together.
Okay.
One of the big images, it's also about balance and the serpent, the rainbow, Papa Damballa, Aida Wedo. They balance the masculine and feminine, and so they also have a lot to do with fertility. So you'll see a lot of egg offerings given to, given on Papa Damballa altars, egg and a little bit of cornmeal. Don't want to get off track. Don't want to get confusing, but each spirit has their own color, their own day of the week, their own feast days, things that they enjoy having on their altars, songs that are sung to them, drum beats that are done specifically for them, and symbols that are drawn on the ground in cornmeal called bebe when you're dealing with the Haitian Loa, that all of this is to call spirit to ceremony. And it's expected but not taken for granted, if you know what I mean, that spirit comes to your ceremony. If they don't, it's like the guest of honor didn't show up at your party.
Right. It's disappointing, but they're the decision maker.
It's not disappointing because they always come. Well, if you are playing the rhythms, if you are singing the songs, they do not disappoint. Okay. They do show up. But yes, if they didn't, then it would be like that guest of honor not showing up.
Gotcha. Did you do different initiation rites for the priestess role and the mambo role is the wrong, honorific, status? Imagine that there's similarities, but there's got to be differences. I'm not sure if you're even allowed to talk about it or not.
Well, there's a lot that I can't talk about, and of course I won't share anything that is secret, okay. ceremonial secrets, but very different. In New Orleans voodoo, because this was a tradition that was steeped in secrecy and that people weren't allowed to practice, a lot of those initiatory rites, they're big ceremonies, they weren't allowed to happen. So that is why a lot of people who, let's say like me, I got my formal priestess initiation in Haiti, where that cycle was never interrupted. You feel me? Mm-hmm. Like that cycle of tradition and initiation was not interrupted. So a lot of people who are called to the priesthood end up going to the area that they are called to, whether that be Africa or Brazil or Cuba or Haiti, wherever that is. They end up getting their formal initiatory rites in those places. Because in New Orleans, as I said, for very, very good reasons, there were disruptions. Large ceremonies were done in secret on bayous. These are not things that were allowed, again, because of slavery, because of the slave trade. These were things that had to be practiced in secret. So that is why the tradition of the solitary practitioner, the botanicas, or the quote-unquote drugstores where you could go get remedies, the focus in New Orleans became a lot more on the magic. And I'm sure you can do the math and understand why that is. Magic is something that you could do behind closed doors, in your own home, in the back of a quote-unquote drugstore. Go get a fix for this, go get a fix for that. So that is why magic is such a focus of New Orleans voodoo, more than it is in a lot of the other traditions that have a major ceremonial focus. A lot of those larger ceremonies just couldn't happen during those times. So for very good reasons, things had to retreat more into like solitary practitioners, stuff that little something done behind closed doors. Now, fortunately, we're in a time where we can take to the streets again, like at our annual Voodoo Fest that we have right here outside of Voodoo Authentica. Every year on Halloween, we're able to take to those streets openly, honor and celebrate all of the contributions that voodoo has made to our local New Orleans culture, history, and traditions. It's all day. It's free. We cook and we celebrate, African dishes, Haitian dishes, New Orleans dishes. We cook all night, home cooked food. We honor our ancestors, the ones we know about, the unknown and forgotten ancestors. We have speakers that are representing Africa, Haiti, and New Orleans, priests and priestesses, honoring all of those traditions. It's a place to come for free, to learn, to embrace, the beauty of New Orleans voodoo and where it historically comes from, to really learn and to eat, to get fed, to feed the community, to literally taste and hear through music and talking and sharing. Some of it is people sharing spiritual songs. Some of it's just coming to get a really good, true, real jambalaya. A delicious mambo brandy, butter beans with pickled pork and sausage. We also take care of our vegetarians. Not with my butter beans and pickled pork and sausage, obviously, but sure. And then at 7:00, everybody comes together and participates in this ancestral reverence ceremony where you can call out, no matter what your tradition is, no matter where you came from, whether you have a European tradition, an African tradition, it doesn't matter. You're able to call out. The veil is thin, as they say. You're able to call out to people that are from your past or people who have passed on recently and call out and get a response. It's a moving moment. And we call it ancestral reverence ceremony. We call it the ancestral healing ceremony. Some people laugh, they cry, they feel connected to those who have crossed over in a way that they haven't felt the rest of the year. So it's a chance to show people how to connect with spirit themselves, because I'm one of those give people a fishing pole, not the fish kind of people. I don't want people depending on me any more than they have to for their own connection to source. I'm like, here's a great way to connect to source. I want them to find that connection on their own. I want them to learn how to do their own altars. And whenever people say, oh, well, what's a good way to get started? I always say the same thing. The best way to get started is an ancestral altar to your own ancestor. ancestors from your own background and your own traditions. Start there. Get the messages from there first. Keep it simple. White cloth, represent your elements. Cup of water, represent your 4 elements, and light that candle, put on the incense, have a representation of earth. Keep it simple. Have a photograph if there's a known ancestor that you miss that has crossed over, and they will talk to you. But it doesn't matter if you're African, Haitian, New Orleans, Irish, Italian. It's the great way to start is start from home. Start with your own ancestors and see where that goes. It doesn't all have to be about voodoo. Start connecting. If you want that spiritual connection, start it close to home with the ancestors that that you can trust, and see what comes from that.
Yeah, ancestor reverence is one of the first, philosophies or religions, whatever term one wants to use, and it's surviving to date. I would like to move on to something. What are some of the common misconceptions that people have about voodoo, whether it's, New Orleans voodoo or, Haitian voodoo? Doesn't matter. What are some of the common misconceptions you encounter? Because I'm sure you hear them all.
Well, we're open 11 to 7 days a week to the general public. We have a website open to the general public. So we get a lot of questions every single day. And it's a really good question, Jeff. And some of the tops would be number one is, what about voodoo dolls? A lot of times you get the only exposure people have had to a voodoo doll is some movie they've seen where there's a pin and the pin's stuck in somebody's leg and then the human being's leg is broken. And that's all they know about voodoo dolls.
Right. Scooby-Doo, Live and Let Die.
Exactly. James Bond comes to mind for sure.
Yep.
But that's really a lot of what people know when they speak about voodoo dolls. And I will say that it's popularized as the voodoo doll, but dolls are used in many forms of magic. So when you see a doll used for magic, it isn't always necessarily a voodoo doll. They have people in witchcraft. They use a figure called a puppet. You're probably familiar with that. So it's not people see a doll used for magic and they immediately assume it's a voodoo doll. That's not always the case. But what I can tell you is that the way we use voodoo dolls at Voodoo Authentica is, well, we have a lot of different dolls, but just the general basic New Orleans voodoo doll made of sticks, local moss, comes with a black and white pin, complete instructions. In those instructions, it lets you know, first of all, we remind people about karma. We remind them that what they're sending out, it ain't a one-way trip. What you're sending out does come back to you. So we remind people to keep that well in the forefront of their mind when they're doing magic, and that there are usually really positive, doesn't have to be Pollyanna, but there are, I don't know if I want positive, yes, but also smarter solutions. Like if you have a boss and they're a nightmare, well, killing the boss is not your best route, typically. It's how about you work on focusing on getting that boss a transfer. It works out better for everything, because usually people behave that way because they're, as you probably well know, they're miserable within their own selves. So you get them a transfer somewhere they're happy, all of a sudden you have a little bit of peace restoration in your own office without harming anyone. So a lot of times when people come to us, they're looking to follow that movie of how do I stick it to somebody with that voodoo doll.
Right.
And I let them know, well, you see these depictions where the pin is used to harm, whereas mainly what we're using the pin for, you can think about it kind of like a spiritual acupuncture, we're using that pin to focus energy into that certain area of the doll that is representing either themselves or another individual. And primarily that's used for healing. You see a pin stuck in the heart, that could be someone's going through a heart procedure. We need to send healing to that area that we've energetically, kind of created and named as that person. It could be the proverbial heart that needs to be healed. So assumptions are made when people see things they don't understand. They assume they see a pin stuck in a voodoo doll.
Right.
But we're using the pins as focusing tools. Again, I'm speaking for myself. I'm speaking for how we do things at Voodoo Authentica. And I try to make that clear. I'm not going to speak for the world. It's not necessary, and it'd just be silly and foolish to do so. I can tell you what I do and how I do it and what works for me and what I find has worked for many, many years. And that is to go about things in the smartest, most karmically responsible way possible. Now, be that as it may, there's some nasties out there that like to send negative magic people's way. Even then, I say you hold up a mirror and you simply do a return to sender. Just like if you send out something negative, it's coming back to you, usually more than one fold. Same thing goes for someone sends something to you. You hold up a mirror, and I use literal mirrors in addition to, spiritual mirrors. It's like, I don't need to originate hexes and curses and negativity. You send something my way, well, it's bouncing back to you, and all I'm doing is a return to sender. Didn't originate it, didn't come from me. You're just getting your own back. So I am a complete endorser of self-protection. Again, I'm not Pollyanna. I'm not like, okay, you send something, I'm going to take it. Hell no. You send something my way, I'm not going to do this pissing match where you send something to me, I'm sending something. No, all I'm going to do is hold up the mirror, and all you're getting is your own back. You should recognize it because you sent it.
It's like a boomerang.
That's it. So that is, to me, the best kind of self-defense magic is just doing a return to sender. It's really effective. Your karma's clean because all you've done is hold up a mirror and sent the stuff back. Nothing has originated from you.
What, if anything, is the difference?
You let it ping off.
Right. So what, if anything, is the difference between the magic that you practice versus what maybe a Wicca would practice, or Egyptian magic, or Chinese magic, or is there? I don't know how to ask that question any better.
Ultimately, magic is magic, and it has a lot to do, as I'm sure you've learned on your journey of exploration, that it has a lot to do with faith. And now, let me make something clear. People think, well, if I don't believe in something myself, the magic of someone else can't affect me. Well, I can't say I subscribe to that, because if the practitioner of magic has faith and belief in what they are doing, they most assuredly can affect the universe and others, whether you believe in it or not.
Yeah, it wouldn't make any sense if you both have to believe it. I mean, that's not a submarine where you both have to turn a key. I mean, the user has to believe.
Right. Like, ultimately, the practitioner, if the practitioner is experienced and capable, they are able to send magic out, whether that be, sending dreams, sending actual, physical impact, hopefully for the greater good and the purpose of good. Fingers crossed. We hope that's what people are doing. We love when they're doing that. But I can use a knife to, to hunt and kill to feed my family. I can also use it to murder someone.
Mm-hmm.
Magic is a tool. I can use that knife to cut up a green bean.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a tool. Magic is a tool, and it's a tool for any tradition. Oh my God, the difference is, there's a sea of differences. There's a sea of different spirits at play that are called on. But when it comes down to it, magic itself is a tool that can be used to help or to harm.
Is there a particular term that you use in your traditions, like the spirit realm or the astral realm or the Akashic fields? Is there some term that people might know?
Can you be a little clearer about what you're asking me in terms of voodoo?
Well, the answer might be no, but you know how, like, in Doctor Strange, he talks about the astral realm. I know a lot of people who are spiritualists talk about the Akashic field or the Akashic record. I
feel you. You've got so many. Whenever there's interviews about voodoo, you're dealing with so many different traditions, and depending on the tradition you're coming from, there are practitioners that work with me that will call the spiritual realm simply the spiritual realm, the home of the Loa, the home of the Orisha. There are people who particularly, African and Haitian tradition too, that'll call that realm Guinea. So, that has African roots. So, it truly depends on who you are speaking to and what tradition they come from. As far as a blanket term, here are what all voodoo people from wherever tradition, whatever country, whatever practice, all call it the same thing. No, that's an absolute no-go. That's not a thing. Okay. Everyone has their own traditions and their own folklore that goes with these traditions. How the Orisha came to be, their own creation stories, their own burial practices, their own ideas about, what are those next steps, after we leave this corporeal form. And that truly goes from tradition to tradition. So one blanket statement about what all voodoo people are calling the spiritual realm ain't gonna get it.
I wasn't going to ask you this, but just since you just mentioned it, what is the creation story or the creation myth in your disciplines?
Oh, Lord, Jeff, another toughie. There are, again, you don't have one. You're dealing with, as I said, in Africa, you're dealing with not one country, but different countries who have their different traditions. And that would be a whole other show. It doesn't even make sense to get into it. That's several books and a 3-hour conversation by itself. I wish I could sum it up, but okay, one tradition, there was an egg, and the, Damballa, created the world, and another tradition, everything came from the back of a turtle. It would just be ridiculous to try to get into all of the different traditions and their ideas about how everything came to be.
Don't be surprised if I try to convince you to do that once, is to give me different creation stories and a 3-hour conversation, which I break up into 2 shows. But
hey, no problem at all. But since we're trying to really tap into kind of New Orleans voodoo and focusing on that will take us on a journey that is so its own fascinating, multicultural, multi-traditional journey with so many creation stories that each deserve their own time and their own respect.
Sold. I'm convinced I'm an easy sell on things like that.
And I will tell you this: because so much over the last really couple hundred years has mixed with the Catholicism, you have to understand that a lot of those stories have been combined with those Catholic origin stories as well.
That's okay.
There's no way of getting around that.
That's some of my favorite stuff when you have, things are sort of, borrowed or built upon or, adapted, when you can see the similarities and then when it's actually part of the tradition itself, I think that's great, as opposed to it's not necessarily supposed to be part of the tradition, but it is. And then people start fighting about what was first. Okay. So we'll move off of that. You mentioned someone earlier in the show and the name is familiar, but I admit I don't really know enough about it offhand. So I think it was Madame Lebeau.
Oh, so the great Mamselle Marie Lebeau. She was a lot of people call her the spiritual, rest her soul, a lot of people call her the spiritual mother of New Orleans voodoo. And she was this, there's a lot of debate and there's a lot of academics that have done research, but born around 1789, passed around 1881, had a lot of children, and there are so many stories about her. In fact, some people would say that she never aged because there was a daughter who followed in her footsteps, and people would say, "Oh, that's Marie Laveau. The original Marie Laveau. She just doesn't age because she did have a number of children." And again, that's a whole other show. Marie Laveau, Mamselle Marie Laveau, deserves her own show, truly, because her history, her contributions to voodoo, to New Orleans voodoo, to women's empowerment, honestly, she's a woman of substance that would walk down the street and you paid attention. A hairdresser by trade, so privy to a lot of secrets.
But a historic.
Hey, we all talk to our hairdressers. So yes.
So I've heard.
Privy to a lot of secrets that way, but she also forged a relationship with a Catholic priest at St. Louis Cathedral, where she would do her ceremonies on the bayou as long as those same people would come to Père Antoine's church on Sunday. So she had an amazing relationship with the Catholic priest. And so a lot of as I said, the Catholic blending, I told you the reason it happened, and that is definitely throughout the world. But in New Orleans, she created some very special bonds between not only those traditions, but the priesthood itself, or at least one very specific special priest. And, think about it. Think about the times and being able to be the kind of woman that could forge a relationship like that.
Sure. That was very political.
Where they had these little, kind of agreements with one another. She would be doing ceremonies on the bayou and also have people, being in church on Sunday. And
it's both
fascinating woman, fascinating human being, and oh my goodness, so many stories connected to her. She would visit prisoners, during the yellow fever epidemic with no concern for her own safety. She was so disturbed at the public hanging that she was a witness to, that there's a huge story about a storm that she brought about. I'm not saying they didn't continue it the next day, but that day it was called off because she brought a huge storm and they couldn't continue that particular hanging. She definitely did a lot for the low, the high. She was in with, if someone could pay with a chicken, they paid with a chicken. she also helped a lot of politicians. So she worked with everyone. Everyone went to see Marie Laveau to get spiritual work done. Whether it was, a school teacher, a politician, the highest of the high and the lowest of the low. And who could paid and who didn't, they gave what they could. And so she, in that way, she began I don't like how it sounds, but the commercial voodoo queen, because quite honestly, exchanges are done all over the world. This is not a New Orleans thing. If you go to a priest or priestess in Haiti, you are going to have an exchange for that work. If you go to Africa, you're going to have an exchange for that work, whether it's goods or money, whatever it's going to be. But she definitely did do magic in exchange for goods.
I understand. She was
she valued herself. She valued her time, and and a lot of times the money that she did get from the wealthy, she used to help out the people who didn't have much, because she certainly didn't take it with her. She did not pass wealthy.
She was progressive and practical as well, and a little bit political as well, it sounds like. Yeah, good. Well, maybe that is another show, as you said. But it sounds like she's the spiritual and historical sort of godmother or matriarch of New Orleans voodoo.
Most definitely. Again, that comes from me, many others, but not to beat a horse bloody, but I like to continue to say I speak for myself, and I'm not alone in this, but I do definitely honor her. There's a very special altar for her, a wishing altar, at Voodoo Authentica, completely in her honor. And those candles on all our altars get lit every day. And people from everywhere. We get people from, Germany, Japan, obviously locals, all over the United States. You name it, people come to Voodoo Authentica and they use our altars, because let's face it, not everyone can have an altar in their house.
That's true. So
they petition the spirits. Our altars they're active all the time. They're honored every day. So people use our altars to petition spirit. And there's also in St. Louis Cemetery number 1, that's where Marie Laveau's tomb is, of course. Everything in here has to be shrouded with mystery. There's debate about where she's actually buried, but her tomb, her official tomb, is in St. Louis number 1, and people are still doing the rituals at her tomb, making the 3 X's, leaving the pennies on the tomb, doing the chicken scratch with their foot on the ground, leaving her hair barrettes, different things that are the color blue, sky blue, like her tignon, like her head wrap. So little cakes, little offerings in exchange for the blessings. And she works with people. These spirits, they really work with people. And then whenever they come back in town, they go back and they thank her for, how she's interceded on their behalf. So she's still at the job. She's still working. Spirits work hard. People, they come in. We get some people. We've been around for a long time, so we get people that have used our altars for you name it. For jobs, for family, for fertility issues, and they come back a couple years later. They've had their baby. They come leave an offering. They thank spirit. So the altars are truly open. We ask that they get guidance, because not everyone knows intrinsically, what are the correct offerings to leave for each spirit. So of course we're there. We have initiated practitioners there every day to help people and answer questions. So we help to guide that process, but the altars are truly open to anyone. People don't have to come in and buy something. They can come in and some people they know what they're doing. They walk in, they have a petition for a Legua or Papa Legua or Zuli Frater or Zuli Danto. They know what they're doing. They know what petition they need to make. They go do their business with spirit. We leave. We know what they're doing. Other people, obviously it's New Orleans. It's the French Quarter. We get visitors from all over the world. So some people are just coming to learn a little bit about voodoo and leave with something, something from New Orleans. And the difference is, at least, when they come to Voodoo Authentica, if they get a voodoo doll, it's actually made here. It's made by a practitioner. If they get a gris-gris bag, it's actually made by a practitioner.
Wait, what's a gris-gris bag?
Oh, some people, you'll hear gris-gris bag, you'll hear mojo bag. It's a bag that our priests make, and our practitioners make. Someone can walk up and they say, okay, I got a little something going on at my job. I need a little help. Or a lot of the local musicians come in to, get more gigs, things like that. So we take a piece of fabric, and depending on what someone's asking for, we'll put it's usually a square of fabric, and we put different herbs and roots. Some of the roots, especially for our musicians, we heat those roots up, over the fire, make them really nice and hot. Some of them need to be cooled down. So we use whatever's appropriate. The herbs, the roots, the dried flowers, they each have their own spiritual properties. Some go with love, some go with prosperity, some go with justice, some go with healing, etc., etc. So every herb has its own property. And we put those herbs, we cinch up the bag, kind of like a sachet, a sachet. And then we cinch it real good with yarn. We anoint it with the right oil. It might be, if it's a love bag, it might be Love Potion number 9, which, of course, we make everything ourselves there. And we anoint the bag, and then we bless it at the appropriate altar. If it's a love bag, we're going to go usually talk to Urzuli Freda or Oshun, who are the spirits that reign over those matters of the heart. Sometimes it's a matter of spiritual balance. We may go to Obatala or Papa Dambala. It all depends on, there is no one way. People come in, they've got different needs, and you got to deal with them as individuals. Right. And you gotta let spirit come through, because sometimes spirit will want an ingredient in that bag, and you gotta listen. It may not be on the list of what normally goes in a love and passion bag, but you got to be open. You got to listen to spirit. No, I need you to put a little of this, a little of that in this bag for this individual. And we'll usually take a little something from them, a little hair or nail clipping to make it theirs, to make sure their energy's in that bag. And those are the practitioner-made bags. They're also like the ready-made bags that are blessed for that purpose, because some people want something that they can pick up and go with. Right. So those bags are blessed for their purpose, love and passion, money and good luck, etc. And they're all made by practitioners, but the practitioner-made bag, like while you wait, that's done on a one-by-one basis. Right. You stand there. You make sure that the practitioner knows what your needs are. And then you leave with that bag, and we let you know how to use it. Right.
Those are custom made, tailored for you with divine intervention at times. And then there's others that are generally effective, but may not be, most effective for someone because it's it's to go. But these sound like they're almost like spells, meeting talismans.
They're all effective. It's just that you have, let's say you're coming in, you got 15 minutes to spend, and you have a lot of people to get things for, so you've just got to grab, 2 love and passion gris-gris, 2 money and good luck gris-gris, 2 do well in school gris-gris. You have to get these things, and you have to leave, and the instructions let you know exactly how to personalize that, how to make it yours. So yeah, they are made and blessed by practitioner in the same way I just laid out. But for people who have a little extra time, they can walk up and they can get a bag and put, like I say, put a little of their, their fingernail, their spit, or their hair, something that makes it theirs. The things that someone can always do at home, but this is something that's done while you wait. But all of them are effective because they work on really sympathetic magic, where you are putting your own. We've already blessed it for that purpose. When you get home, you've got to keep that going. You've got to meditate with that bag. You've got to keep broadcasting that energy. You've got to spend time. Like I said, these are tools. You got to spend time with that tool to keep that focus going, to keep that broadcast going. The herbs have energy. The energy that the practitioner has blessed it with has energy. And you are a key ingredient in that magic.
Right.
Your energy is a key ingredient, and blending that with what we've already put into it.
What about tarot? Is tarot related to voodoo?
In as much as some practitioners choose to use that as a divination tool, we've got, I know voodoo practitioners who use the crystal ball. I know voodoo practitioners who use cowrie shells, who use bones, who use stones, who use tarot cards, who use playing cards. Again, it's not a one size fits all. It's some of it comes from how did you learn? Who taught you? And a lot of times you're going to go with the medium, the divination medium that you were taught to use.
Right.
And what, just what vibrates with you. And also, there's a million different kinds of tarot decks. There's a deck called the New Orleans Voodoo Tarot that's, written by, a priestess and a priest, and some people really connect with that imagery. There's other people that do better with an angel deck or even a Crowley deck, or like I said, a crystal ball, chicken bones, coins. So I have a lot of readers in my life, and I will tell you the most popular reading style for the people who come in Voodoo Authentica is tarot, and I think it's just because people are most familiar with it.
Right. I mean, again, not getting too much into the James Bond Live and Let Die, I think was the name of the movie. Jane Seymour was, she was reading the tarot, and then there was the guy who was what character was he playing? With the top hat and the skeleton?
Well, I'll tell you what people were attempting to represent, but not necessarily representing properly. Okay. When you have the top hat and the glasses, sometimes go missing, they're either trying to represent typically Baron Samedi or Papa Gede.
Okay.
These are spirits of death, sex, and resurrection. And surprisingly, also the primary healers, particularly of the Haitian pantheon, and very protective of children because of, you got the cycle of life thing going on. So I can tell you what many movies are and imagery that you see even on sports teams, what they're attempting to represent, and what some popular TV shows, they may use the spirit's name, but all of the attributes are wrong. I won't name the name, but there's a TV show that has a character, a quote-unquote voodoo character, that is dressed like, Baron Samedi and his son Papa Gede, depending on the scene. Mm-hmm. But he's being presented as Papa Legba with all the attributes of actually Papa Gede, or they've created like an amalgamation where, all right, we're blending Papa Legba, Baron Samedi, and Papa Gede all into one, and creating our own character which shares all these attributes. So that's what you see a lot in movies is they've done, they say a little research is a dangerous thing. Mm-hmm. They've done a little research. They've made this little puzzle. They made this puzzle of different spirits because they thought the top hat was cool. They thought the cemetery king was cool, but they also wanted him to be the door opener. So they just decided to make this, like put it in a blender, and we're calling this spirit this, because at least that's one of the names. So that's what you see a lot in popular media, is the blend where they've actually gotten some of the facts right, but they've just blended it all together.
Right. And the third thing that I see that I'm sure fits into the misconceptions or really gets people annoyed, but oftentimes zombies are associated with voodoo.
Well, a lot of that was popularized by the Wade Davis book, Serpent in the Rainbow, which is a really interesting book that I recommend people who are interested in the the science behind zombies. I do highly recommend they read the book. The guy is, whatever, an ethnobotanist, or, he really did the research. He really did go to Haiti. He really did explore this, very, very mystifying topic. But in popular culture, the zombies and the brain eating, it's very different than what Wade Davis was exploring, which is really, pharmacological. Involves one ingredient, is, I'm not giving away the formula. One ingredient comes from the blowfish, because pretty much everyone knows that part of it. And it renders the person to where they appear dead.
Right.
You can't feel a pulse. Everything just slows down to the point where they're dead, and then very deprived of oxygen. So when they are taken out of the ground, it is a very slavish state that some people recover from, but many don't. It's definitely not a good thing. It's all about control, and it's more in the province. This is no insult to Bokors. Bokors are particularly Haitian practitioners of magic that are not necessarily confined to the rules of, let's say, the path that most Ungan or Voodoo, Haitian-initiated Voodoo priests are on. They are, you'd say, spiritual mercenaries for hire. And none of this is meant to sound insulting. It's just trying to give you the best understanding of, what a Bokor does. A Bokor is a magician.
Right.
And they typically are magicians for hire. So the same, and these are different cultures too, with different needs. Like, we could say, oh my God, this level of control is horrifying. We would never do such a thing in our first world environment. Well, sometimes, you don't live like other people. You don't know what their needs are, just how desperate that mother is to, have, that father pitch in for their child, or whatever the case may be. You're dealing with totally different cultures who are subject to, their own ideas of what is right and wrong, based on what their own needs are. So I try not to apply, okay, that's why I always say, here's what I do.
Sure.
Not just like, oh, I'm so righteous, just here's what I do. And here's what my environment allows me to do.
Yeah, we're not trying to put judgment on it. We're just
I had a dear friend, again, rest his soul, passed not too long ago, who is a brilliant Bokor. And again, it is up to each Bokor to decide on what their limitations are, what they will and will not do. You do have some people that will do some major nastiness, and you have others who won't. And that is up to each individual Bokor to do. But the reason I brought up Bokors is because that's much more in the province of the Bokor than it is for the initiated voodoo priests. That's even in Haiti.
Right, but it's not like The Walking Dead, you know. It's more of something that maybe is used for punishment. I don't know what some people recover from. It's more like somebody appeared to be dead, and then when they arise, they're sort of in a fugue state, and it mimics what a zombie, and it's sort of taken its, you know, the myth has sort of grown from that.
It's basically done to control the will of another human being, and typically to have that individual, you know, do the person who created them's bidding. I'm not saying that it's a common practice or it happens all the time. I'm also not going to say it never happens, you know, because it's, you know, it's silly not to just be honest. You know, it's like, this is what I can tell you is that it isn't a good thing. It's not a blessing. It is not something. It is definitely something that would be a punishment. I'm not always saying it's a deserved punishment. Sometimes people just want control over another human being for their own nefarious reasons.
Are there any other things that go bump in the night that are misapplied to or properly associated with voodoo?
Well, I think there's a lot of misunderstandings about possession, about spirit possession, and that comes a lot with trying to equate spirit possession with demonic possession, which do not have anything to do with one another. You know, one is in the province of the Christian faith, and other faiths, you know, that have demons and angels in their theology. And spirit possession is, you remember I told you about ceremonies and when you call on the guest of honor, if they don't show up?
Yes.
Okay. You know, the guest of honor didn't come. Well, part of the majority of voodoo ceremonies is that primarily the initiated Ungan and Mambo are mounted, ridden by the spirits. Like you call on, let's say, Papa Dambala. I mentioned that's a Haitian Loa spirit in balance, of a spiritual cleansing balance. And when spirit has been presented with certain offerings, their bebe has been drawn on the ground. And right now I'm speaking, you know, about Haitian Loa right now, because Papa Dambala is a Haitian Loa. You have, let's say you called Papa Dambala, and Papa Dambala has come. There are certain things that go with that spirit. That spirit takes over that person. Again, ideally, it's an initiated Ungan and Mambo, but not always. That's ideal because Ungan and Mambo are equipped to deal with spirit possession. They know how to step out of the way. And that's not an easy thing to do, to step out of the way of your consciousness and kind of let someone else take the wheel for a little while. But when they come, they are giving blessings to those there. Some spirits speak, some spirits do not speak in verbal language. Some spirits will have whole conversations with you. Some spirits will connect with you by putting their head to your head and sending you a message that way. You can speak with them, whether they're able to verbally speak back to you or not, but you can receive, calming from certain spirits, balance from certain spirits, other spirits, resolution to conflicts that are going on in the community. The same thing that someone might come in to ask for, a reading at Voodoo Authentica or a bag. At ceremony, some of these same things are asked for. I'm really trying to, it may be something like I'm trying to move forward in my spiritual path. Some people are just asking for, I really want to I'd like to be a little luckier in my job. And spirit is there. They are in the driver's seat. And they can do things like you may have a woman who is possessed by a spirit, a woman who doesn't smoke, a woman who doesn't drink, but that spirit does drink and smoke. They may down a whole bottle. They may smoke a pack of cigarettes. That human being is not a smoker or drinker, but the spirit consumes that, and the person can come out of it without being drunk, without going, on occasion, you do have this half consciousness thing going on too, where the person being ridden is, sometimes they're completely out of the way, and sometimes they're conscious for, part of what's going on, or they're able to get the view. And so sometimes they do come out of it feeling certain effects, but I've seen some feats that, skin not be, when someone has Papa Ogu in them, a machete that would pierce the skin if it was human just won't pierce the skin because
I think we're
what
losing.
the hell they're doing.
Oh, okay. I thought that was the connection.
Yeah, I don't recommend this for people who don't know what the hell they're doing. But when someone is truly being ridden by spirit, there are things they can do that they cannot do when they're just in their normal human form without spirit, riding them. And I've seen it again and again and again and again. And it's, like I said, it's expected, but always just divine, amazing, and never taken for granted. At the same time that I say it's divine, these are like family members. Like when Papa Legba comes, he can sit down and talk with you for a long time, tell stories. Kind of like you feel like if you were with your grandfather telling stories. So it can feel, like a very family space. But
that sounds nice.
It's remarkable. It's common but not commonplace, if you know what I mean, or commonplace but not common. It's hard to explain how we expect these things to happen but never take them for granted. And that's at every ceremony.
Well, I think you've done an excellent job of sort of expressing yourself and explaining these huge concepts and explaining the sacred's the word that comes to mind, how sacred these beliefs and traditions are. Where can people find you and support you, and how can they find the store and all that other great stuff?
Well, ideally they come. Thanks for asking.
Of course.
Ideally, they'll come straight to Voodoo Authentica of New Orleans Cultural Center and Collection, which is open 7 days a week. We are at 612 Dumaine Street in the Quarter. That's the block between Royal and Charters.
Okay.
And go have themselves some beignets down the street at Cafe Du Monde, and then come stop by and see us. And no, I don't have any kind of agreement with Cafe Du Monde. It's just fun to get a little powdered sugar all over yourself before you, and some cafe au lait before you start your day. Great way to start your day. And walk on down Dumaine. Come on. There are other shops in the area, so if they want to specifically come, can you still hear me?
I can.
Okay. If they want specifically to come to Voodoo Authentica, then, they have to make sure they're in the right place, because there are other establishments. There's something to be gained from every establishment. By all means, people should check them all out. But since you're asking about Voodoo Authentica, it's very clear on the sign. Voodoo Authentica is Voodoo Authentica, and if the sign doesn't say that, then you're not at Mambo Brandy's spot.
There you go.
And so that's one way, is just come on and see us in person, especially on October 31st. We'll be doing our 23rd or 24th Voodoo Fest. It's always on the 31st, whether that falls on a Monday, a Saturday. It's always on the 31st, always on Halloween. And Voodoo Fest is an amazing day that everyone, it's also a nice opportunity because you are meeting people you might not otherwise meet, priestesses from all over the place, and everybody kind of gathers for this. So it's really wonderful. The other thing is they can go on voodooshop.com. That's VOODOOSHOP.com and support, a lot of our New Orleans spiritual artists, African spiritual artists, Haitian spiritual artists, and a lot of people we support others. For example, the lady she's family, really, Mary Jo, she runs an orphanage and a school in Haiti. So when people get Haitian art from us, that's supporting what she's doing. So everything from us really supports something else that supports something else that supports something else. So, as I mentioned, I'm a New Orleans girl. I have a focus on New Orleans, but we honor the roots and we make sure we support our roots.
Excellent. Well, you've made that very clear, and I think that's amazing. So, folks, hopefully this is something that you're interested in, and if you are, you know where to go to get more information. And obviously, she's open to questions.
Hold on. And also, one more thing. They can call 50. Like I said, we're open 7 days a week, 11 to 7. They can call us at 504-522-2111, and unless it's a holiday, we're open 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. 7 days a week. They can call. They can talk to someone who knows about voodoo. They can schedule a reading, a spiritual cleansing. There's a lot that we do now over the phone. We really try to accommodate people during the pandemic by offering Skype and all these. And so we've stuck to that. We're still offering, for people who can't get to the shop, we offer phone readings, Skype readings, and, all done by real practitioners who actually care about people and know what the heck they're doing, and care about spirit and care about the spirits that we're honoring at Voodoo Authentica.
Excellent. Well, then that's exactly what you're advertising, Voodoo Authentic. So, excellent. Thank you very much for that. Folks, lots of ways to reach her and her team. I thank you once again. And folks, give her a little support, a little love, spread the word. And hopefully you'll do the same for the show. Rate, review, and share it. And we will hear from you next week in the Garden of Doom.